Hello there, and welcome to Spectrum Debate number 24. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Google Plus, or on our website spectrumdebates.com, you are very welcome. Now, as this is our first show since Thursday's election, this is going to be what we are discussing tonight. The highs and lows, the anticipation, the expectation, the events, the shocks, the surprises, the results themselves, and of course, what is going to happen next. But as ever, we want to hear your views, and we want you to send in questions or points to challenge each of our guests tonight. You can do so using the hashtag SD24, and I'll do my best to put your questions to our guests and to let all of our viewers know what you are thinking. If you are watching on Google Plus, you can of course use the Applause app, which is basically the worm, and at 9 o'clock over on spectrumdebates.com a poll is launched which will ask who your favourite debater from tonight was. Last week's winner, the last before the general election, with over 30% of the vote, was Daryl. So very big congratulations to you, Daryl. But without further ado, let me introduce you to our guests tonight. And on my screen from left to right we have a new guest. We have Darren Grimes, who is a supporter of the Liberal Democrats. Good evening, Darren.
Hello.
How are you? Welcome to Spectrum Debates.
Thank you very much.
Now, tell us a little about yourself.
I'm 21 years old and a student from, I don't know if you can tell, the northeast of England.
And where is it you're studying?
I'm studying in Newcastle.
And what is it you're studying?
Oh, I'm studying fashion.
Okay, and that is the job interview over. Thank you very much indeed. And our next guest is a familiar face to all of us. It's Lily Jane Summers. Good evening, Lily. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too, Gareth.
Have you recovered from the election?
I'm still in shock, but I'm surviving, Gareth. I'm no longer depressed. I'm pumped up for the next Parliament to take on the Conservative Party.
What you mean is, are you pumped up? Hell yes.
Yeah, no, not now. Not now.
Well, it's nice to have you back. Hello, Lily.
Hi.
Our next guest is another new guest. It's Matt Gavin. Good evening, Matt. How are you?
Oh, it's me. Hello.
Yes,
yeah, I'm absolutely
just to surprise
fine.
you. And
When you introduced
tell
me
us
as
a little about yourself.
Well, you introduced me as Matt, but I suspect the viewers will probably know me better by the variety of wild names that you introduced me on through tweets on other shows.
Yes, you're one of our three guests who always has an inventive name, so it's nice to... We've had two of you on so far. It's nice to see the face, as it were, although we can see yours on Twitter, but you know what I mean. Anyway, sorry.
So I don't, for the sake of full disclosure, I suppose, to borrow one of your quotes, I did vote Liberal Democrat in the last election, in the general election rather, and Conservative in the local election, but I don't consider myself as part of any particular party, and I'm a medical science student, and I'm joining you from Leeds tonight.
Marvellous. We have a northern bias so far, from myself and Darren. It depends where Lily... Where are you from tonight, Lily? Is it Swansea?
I'm here in Wales at the moment.
You're in Wales, okay. So okay. So we have a 3-1 split so far. However, that's going to go out the window with our next guest, who is new to Spectrum Debates. It's Skylar Baker-Jordan. Good evening.
Good evening.
And where is it you are broadcasting from tonight? Because, as people might guess from your accent, assuming they don't already follow you on Twitter, you are not from Newcastle, Leeds, or Wales.
No. I am coming to you live from Walthamstow in northeast London, but I am originally from Chicago.
Lovely. And you've come over here specifically to look at and watch and comment on the UK elections, haven't you?
Yeah, I crowdfunded an entire trip over here. My followers came through, and I've been reporting on the ground here in London for the last week, and I'm here for another week.
Marvellous, thank you very much indeed. Of course, incidentally, if anyone has any ideas for crowdfunding for host Gareth, it might be to perhaps go somewhere and buy some new jumpers. Please let me know, and I'd be happy to write whatever you need for an appropriate crowdfunding website. And our next guest, last but by no means least, is another returnee. It's William Brown. Good evening, William. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Gareth.
And congratulations to you, William, first of all, because it's hard for someone to boast about these things, but you have, I believe, in the elections this week won a council seat which you were not expecting to win because it had been safely held by another party for quite some time. So well done to you.
Yeah. I've won I'm now part of Taunton Deane Borough Council, and I'm coming from you live from Somerset tonight.
Marvellous. So we've got two southern broadcasters, as it were, a southerner in the north, two northerners in the north, and a midlander in Wales. This programme gets pretty confusing, but we're very glad to see you all here tonight. For again, as Matthew pointed out, for full disclosure, I'm Gareth, I'm your host, and I am a Conservative, and I'm still a councillor, having managed to cling on to my own ward this week, somehow in the only council in the country to be lost by the Conservatives and go to Labour, but we always manage to buck a trend somehow in Cheshire. During this night, I will do my best to play devil's advocate and to challenge all of our guests equally and explore each idea. Standard disclaimer here is just that while some of our guests may support a party or be a member of our party, nobody here speaks officially for or on behalf of a party, so please take everything everyone says here tonight as being their own personal opinions. Of course, if you'd like to appear here next week or in future, direct message us, get in touch with us on Twitter or Facebook, and reserve your place. We really do welcome as many of you as possible, whatever your political views. Now, the news this week, well, it was dominated by an election that was apparently the least predictable in electoral history. The only unpredictability people felt, of course, was what would the coalition be at the end of it. The big unpredictability being that it actually produced a majority Conservative government, which was something that nobody outside Linton Crosby and David Cameron seemed to be expecting. Last week I was told off a little by somebody after the show for claiming that the Lib Dems have been forgotten by everybody. Well, it seems that I was right. The Labour Party, of course, no one can find their stone monolith anymore. It appears that vanished quite almost as quickly as Gordon Brown did after the last general election. The joke of the week that I've heard is that how many UKIP MPs does it take to change a light bulb? Answer is all of them. And of course then we return to the good old issue of the Green Party under Natalie Bennett. And once more, I don't have anything to add to that, really, as they added nothing to their tally of MPs. And in fact, they lost Brighton and Hove City Council. Not a great night for them either. So it was a huge election. It was a very confusing election, and no one really knew what was going to happen, as I say, except it seems Linton Crosby and David Cameron. So let's see, what do our guests think about what went on? I'm going to be a little cruel here. I'm going to start with you, Lily, and I know that you often get picked to start. I know you often get picked to start when I'm picking things out of the hat at random, but I suppose I might as well do it manually here. Labour, of course, should have won this election, shouldn't they? And not only did Labour obviously get hammered by the SNP in Scotland to end up with, you know, a panda number of MPs, as it were, but Labour got hammered in England as well. What went wrong?
Well, I wouldn't say we got hammered, Gareth, but we should have done much, much better. If you look at the entire general election, we increased our vote by about 700,000 votes, so we didn't get hammered, we didn't, you know, our vote didn't go down, but, you know, there's seats we should have got, you know, and seats that we lost. You know, we lost Morley and Outward, we lost Boston Northwest. I mean, there were so many seats we should have gained from the Conservatives in England, and you know, from my perspective, Gareth, who thought that Ed Miliband would be Prime Minister after the election, I didn't realise how strong the incumbency effect the new Conservative MPs that got elected in 2010 would have. I didn't realise that the Lib Dems would get absolutely massacred. And I personally didn't realise how great an effect the scaremongering over the SNP factor would have over a Labour government. So I don't think we got massacred in Scotland. We should have done massively better in Wales, and in England we just didn't gain enough seats. So it wasn't good enough.
But what went wrong? Some people have talked about this election being rather like 1992. I believe that some extra special guru and oracle claimed in the recent past that this election would not be unlike 1992 and there'd be a double Kinnock effect. I can't, for the life of me, remember who that was, but they were absolutely right. Thinking about Kinnock's, you know, "we're all right" moment at the Sheffield rally, was Ed Miliband's "we're all right" moment when he unveiled that stone monolith, which has now gone missing? Was it when he went on to I can barely speak his name, Russell Brand's chat show online, and suddenly came over all sort of, you know, I'm a working class Cockney geezer, which was the bit that made people finally think they're a bit desperate and I can't vote for him?
I'm not too sure, Gareth. I think the problem with going to Russell Brand in particular is that the day after, when the news that he did go to Russell Brand's house, Ed Balls did a really big speech on the economy and criticising the Conservatives' unfunded pledges, but that didn't get noticed by the media. So there was I thought our campaign was still pretty good, Gareth. But I think the problem is we didn't really respond to the fact that the SNP would have an influence over the Labour government. We didn't really respond, I think, to that scaremongering. I think Tory voters voted Tory more for that reason rather than, for example, their Tory manifesto. So I think we should have made a bigger attack on the economy. We should have deflected the tax on the SNP. We should have been. I don't know why we had resources trying to kick Nick Clegg out and divert them from Morley and outward. I mean, it's just very small mistakes. We just didn't gain enough seats. I mean, we didn't get massacred across the country. We increased our vote. But I think we just made small mistakes that will eventually be more realised in the future, Gareth, as the new leader is elected.
Okay, now thinking, you just used the term massacre, which again some other divine person used earlier on, and I think one place we can certainly use the word massacre is with the Liberal Democrats. Now, Darren, it was obviously an incredibly bad night for the Liberal Democrats, and I think it's fair to say that absolutely nobody until the exit poll thought that the Lib Dems would drop to as few seats as they did. And even the exit poll overestimated the number of seats they would have. Are the Lib Dems now, is it a dead parrot? Is it the kind of thing that Monty Python would make a sketch out of?
Not at all. I think that there is definitely still room for a liberal voice in Britain. I think Britain is a liberal, tolerant nation. And I just think that the Tory rhetoric of fear combined with this Labour campaign, which seemed to be more centred on the Liberal Democrats than it was the Conservatives, who are the sworn enemy, which I found rather bizarre. But anyway, I think that, like Lily said, actually, the Labour hate campaign against people like Nick Clegg, these senior Liberal Democrat politicians that they saw as been big triumphs if they took the seat from them. But I think, as Lily said again, I agree with Lily, that the Tory rhetoric of fear around a Labour SNP pact, if you will, really scared people, and many in Middle England were obviously really concerned with the economic repercussions of such a pact, and that's what's provoked a Tory majority.
If it wasn't something to be, let's say, feared, but if it wasn't something for people to be worried about and opposed to, why did the Liberal Democrats positively rule out taking part in any government that included the SNP?
Because nationalism is dangerous. I'm not saying that for a second. I think nationalism is wrong. It's really dividing Scotland in a total negative way. And I don't think that we should have any part in that at all. But as far as the Tory rhetoric was, I don't think voters in Scotland are something to be feared.
Okay, I'll come back to that point later, maybe. Now, Skylar, I just want to think at this point in time about the people who did quite badly at the election. I don't want to call them the losers, but that's basically what they were. What do you think was the thing, as someone who's viewing it from the outside, what was it that caused this to be, as Chris G on Twitter is currently saying, Labour's worst result in terms of seats since 1987. He says they were wiped out in Scotland, wiped out in southern England. There was a Tory revival in Wales. What is it that meant, first of all, Labour did so badly when they were predicted by so many to end up as the leading party of a coalition government, and why the Liberal Democrats were so heavily defeated?
Well, I think it's a complicated answer, and you really need to look at it in terms of the fragmenting left and the fact that Tony Blair won 3 elections running to the right of where Labour had been historically. And that's really interesting because at that point it worked for him really, really well. But contrary to I think contrary to the prevailing opinion right now, the tectonic plates of British politics did shift after the financial crisis. And you can see it because over 50% of the electorate voted for a left-wing party. All right, I can't remember who it was, if it was you or if it was Lily, said it was a very bad night for the Greens. It was it was actually a very good night for the Greens. They astronomically increased their share of the vote. It was also a good night for UKIP as far as increasing their share of the vote. And I think that just talking to grassroots activists in those parties, you're going to kind of see, because it's a tangent here, those two uniting for electoral reform, because I think that they're really ready for it. The SNP, look, it has nothing to do with Scottish independence, because if the voters of Scotland wanted independence, they would have had it back in September. It's the fact that Labour abandoned the left. And it's the same thing that hurt Labour in the northern marginals, where UKIP really attracted a large share of those voters. Because Nigel Farage, whether you want to admit it or not, is really great at speaking of populist rhetoric. Is it sort of a load of crap? Probably. But he's really good at appealing to those voters in a way that Labour just simply didn't. And as far as what really did it, what the "we're fine" moment was, it was the Edstone. The Edstone was just such a monumental fail, excuse the pun, and it really showed Ed Miliband as being incredibly out of touch. And also, those promises were so vague; they meant nothing.
But surely, I mean, you've talked about how Labour sort of, abandoned the left, as it were. I mean, their entire campaign was based on, there were all these awful, dreadful, rich Tories who are screwing the poor and making everyone work on a 0 hours contract, and everyone's being taxed for things like bedrooms and having to go to food banks, when for the vast majority of people, that quite sort of old-fashioned left-wing rhetoric just didn't ring true because it wasn't relevant to their lives. Wasn't that the real problem for Labour, is that they actually tried to go left-wing in their rhetoric, but it just didn't respond to what people know from their real life?
Well, I don't think it is, because if you look at parties that ran with left-wing rhetoric, I mean, Scotland has shown that socialism is not dead north of the border. To quote Rory Penny, I would live in Red Scotland in a heartbeat. But I think that if you look at the share that the Greens and the share that UKIP attracted, particularly in the northern marginals, I think it becomes clear that it's not their rhetoric that people were turned off to, it's their record. The vast majority of Labour MPs voted for an additional $30 billion in cuts just this January. So you can look at the record of Labour over the last 5, 10, 15, even 20 years, and it's not a left-wing record. And so their rhetoric, first of all, I hate to shoot the messenger here, and I like Ed Miliband, but a lot of it is down to just, a really bad messenger, a really bad politician. Probably in hindsight, and I liked Ed in 2010, probably not the best choice. But the rhetoric didn't match the record.
Thank you. Now, William, you are perhaps, in terms of pure political activism, the only person on this panel tonight able to give a broad smile, because you outperformed everybody's predictions, didn't you?
Just a bit. I would like to jump in on what Skylar said a second and just say, would you say that because Labour had only went partially to the left compared to the SNP, that they didn't do as well? Is that what you were saying, in a way?
Essentially, yes. They abandoned the left.
Yeah. Okay. That was just. Yeah, Gareth. We had a very good night. I'm personally calling Linton Crosby Saint Linton at the moment. I know that the Church of England may canonise him. I know the Labour Party probably like to canonise him as well, but probably with an actual canon. Yeah, we've got very broad smiles. But down here in the southwest, the whole landscape's changed because all the old Lib Dem seats have gone. Paddy Ashdown's seat, which is neighbours onto my new MP's constituency, is gone, and that's been a very Lib Dem seat for a very long time. And well, now Marcus Fisher's in it. I'm hoping he's going to do very well, but it's changed the whole landscape. Put it like this: the only seat in the southwest that isn't Tory is Ben Bradshaw's in Exeter, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Well, a couple of the comments people have made online so far, Eric, and there are so many. Thank you all. I mean, it's just Twitter is exploding, and I'm not going to be able to get to anything like half of them, and they're so good. Eric Galinsky at A. Galinsky, economic competence, leadership, and the far left opinions of the SNP are what sunk the Labour Party's campaign. Leon French at Leon Sean French, I think Labour's problem was there was a bit of confusion between rhetoric and policy, and it didn't really match. Chris G says Labour talked about tax cut for millionaires and food banks, but 95% of the public are unaffected by either. John Hudson Mousley, sobbing, local elections were so much better, he says, and he, of course, is our friendly kipper. Yes, Chris at All Riff No Raff. Let's not forget Labour weren't above scaremongering themselves on the NHS and on welfare. Nathaniel Higgins at MathGGNS. The only losers in this election were Labour and the Lib Dems. Where are we? There are so many, and I can, my eyes are going a bit strange here. I will come back to them in a moment because there were some I really wanted to read out, and I seem to have lost them. Oh yes, Bradley Booth. Here we are, Bradley_Booth95. How does it feel to have the same number of seats as Labour in their northern heartlands, Gareth? 111. That's a question really for William and Lily and Darren. But more rhetoric than anything else, I think. More a rhetorical one. Okay. What did you genuinely think was going to be the result of this election? Okay, I mean, when you thought about it, and those of you who might have been out campaigning, and you saw what was going on, what did you really think was going to happen this time round, Darren?
Well, when we were, talking to people and hearing feedback, looking at the polls, all of that, it was all saying, I genuinely, hand on heart, believed that we would come back with about 30 seats. Which quite apparently wasn't the case. But I think that a lot of people really were for the coalition. We had a lot of support, actually, from a lot of papers that came out quite surprisingly, I think, especially The Independent, in support of the coalition and saying that they wished it had more of a liberal voice than that of a conservative one. And I think once you get it becomes quite insular, I think, when you're in a campaign like that and you're around like-minded people, that you just start to genuinely believe that you are going to do quite well. But like I said before, I just genuinely believe that this rhetoric that, well, Linton Crosby deserves a pay rise or something, I would say, because it's obviously worked.
Why would anyone join the Lib Dems after what's happened?
Because, like I said before, Britain does need a liberal voice. Britain is a liberal nation, and I think that we're the only party. I don't think that the Conservative Party are going to be, whilst they might offer opportunity in the form of jobs, they're going to increase apprenticeships, I believe. I don't think they're going to do it in a fair way. I think that there's obviously going to be massive cuts in benefits. 12 billion, which is a massive amount, and I think that Britain needs a party that stands up for fiscal responsibility whilst also being more socially protective, really.
Perhaps the Liberal logo should be changed to a fence so that you can all sit on it and say we like both sides.
Well, we do, Gareth. Deal with it.
Okay, fair enough. Matt, now, you in the end split your vote both ways. I mean, you went for the Conservatives locally, Lib Dems nationally. What was your thinking behind that?
Well, ultimately, I was in favour of another Conservative Lib Dem coalition, and I genuinely thought that was going to be the case, because I don't think the coalition had done badly enough to have lost a substantial number of seats on both sides. Like, I knew the Lib Dems were going to get, like, I've said before that I thought the Lib Dems were going to get decimated, but I didn't expect it to be in an absolute literal sense of having like 10% of the votes they had before.
What made you vote Conservative locally?
No particular reason. I just wanted to split my vote, and I felt like the Lib Dems had a slightly better chance of doing better in the general than the Conservatives in my constituency, which is a pretty safe Labour seat.
Fair enough. Okay. Next, I want to ask you all about the evening of the election itself. I mean, were there any particularly memorable moments for you? Any highlights, any lowlights? The kind of thing that they always talk about the Portillo moment from 1997. What was it that stands out for you from that evening? or the day of the election itself? Skylar, I'm going to come to you because, of course, you were here specifically to look at that election. What stood out for you?
I think that, and again, it wasn't an unexpected result, but for some reason, it really, I don't want to say hurt my heart, but I think that it kind of drove home the gravity of the night when Douglas Alexander lost his seat to a 20-year-old. And that was, for me, maybe the defining moment of the election. It also made me, I have to say, reassess every decision I've ever made in my entire life, because you've got a 20-year-old who's now a member of parliament, and so I definitely, for me that was the big one. Is you have this stalwart of Scottish Labour felled by, a very young woman who is actually skipping her first year in parliament to finish her degree.
Okay, so Douglas Alexander going was your big moment.
I think he means Jim Murphy, because Douglas Alexander is Lib Dem, and he was talking about Jim Murphy, the Labour.
Danny Alexander.
Right, no, sorry, right. Douglas Alexander is a Lib Dem. Sorry,
no, you were right. No, Danny Alexander was the Lib Dem. Douglas Alexander was
okay.
the Labour.
Now we're.
There's so many Alexanders.
Well, I mean,
it's like the election itself, chaos.
If there's one thing we can all be grateful of after this election, is that there are now 2 fewer D. Alexander MPs, and this confusion will never happen again. William, what was the highlight or lowlight for you?
Galloway going. It has to be Galloway going. I'm not a huge fan of George Galloway in any respect, but let's put it like this: when they said. I was doing the count, and in my local election, my local constituency election, and someone ran into the hall and said, "Oh, they're announcing Bradford," and everyone pretty much emptied into the room, and there was a hell of a cheer from every single party when he went. So that's got to be it. I think everyone can agree with that.
Yeah. Naturally, I take no view on any of these matters, but goodbye, Galloway. Compose. Matthew, what was your highlight?
I think it would definitely be an extension of Douglas Alexander going, and that would be like the total sweep of the SNP in Scotland. It was really quite remarkable that that a party that's got something like I'm unsure of the exact values, but something like 5% of the vote can get 56 seats in government. And like with every single announcement, SNP, 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 particularly the Douglas Alexander one, the Danny Alexander one, lots of big names in politics, Joe Swinson being another, just toppling like dominoes to this SNP uprising. I was surprised by it. Well, not necessarily by it happening, but just at the sheer scale of which Scotland just bowed down to the SNP.
Yeah, Alex Salmon seemed to particularly enjoy that evening, and you can understand why, because it was really quite phenomenal to see, time after time. And actually, it wasn't unlike 1997. For those of us who were Conservatives at the time, we watched the similar thing happen to us, but pretty much all over the country. We watched cabinet ministers fall left, right, and centre. So I have to say, Labour Party, I feel your pain on this. So I empathise. I don't sympathise, obviously, but I empathise. Lily, did you have a highlight?
My highlight will probably have to be the exit poll. I was absolutely gobsmacked by the exit poll. I thought a Labour SNP government of some kind was inevitable. I didn't think David Cameron could stay on, let alone increase his vote, and then the exit poll actually turning out to be wrong, because it was actually even worse. The Tories actually got a majority. When I was watching the results of doing the results for Britain Elects, I was just hoping, just don't give the Tories majority. That's the only thing I want all night. Just don't give the Tories majority, and they got it. And then you saw Gower lose to the Tories, which was held by Labour since 1906. And you saw Cardiff North stay in Tory. I mean, the biggest highlight is the exit poll, because I really couldn't believe it. The Tories on 316, Labour down to about 239.
I mean, wasn't that actually part of the problem? Because many of the parties in the election in fact, almost all of them, perhaps with the exception of UKIP and obviously the Conservatives, as you'll see, framed their argument and the reason for voting for them as being stop the evil Tories. The Green Party said it because they were the real alternative. They'll move Labour to the left, and that would stop the evil Tories. The SNP said it because they said a strong SNP would help defend Scotland from the evil Tories. I need to stop saying evil Tories because I know what Cameron will do with that on a video. Plaid Cymru did the same thing in Wales, and Labour, of course, based basically its entire campaign on evil Tories, and we can stop them, and you need to vote for us. And then it was sort of the entire thing. They'll sell the NHS to dead miners' babies that they've eaten. And this is sort of there wasn't a positive reason given. The whole rhetoric was stop the Tories, and in the end, the country sort of said, actually no. We're going to vote for them a bit more and give them a few more seats. And doesn't that seem a bit of a shame that all those parties were just reduced to who can hate the Tories more?
Are you asking me, Gareth?
Yeah.
Well, I think it was often in reverse as well. I mean, I don't think the Tories got as much media negativity, the amount of scaremongering. I thought Ed Miliband had it much worse. He had about a week of the Sun just completely stabbing him repeatedly. And then you had the Mail, then you had the Telegraph, then you had the Times. I thought there was Labour scaremongering on the NHS. There was Labour scaremongering on certain issues. But I thought the Conservative negative campaign. I thought the Tories campaign was completely atrocious. Their manifesto, Gareth. If you look at the Conservative Party manifesto, it's awful. I personally don't think. Just to make another point, I personally think that the voters didn't actually vote for the Conservative Party manifesto. I don't think they voted for those £12 billion welfare cuts. I personally think they just voted to stop the SNP. I don't think the Labour Party economic message was strong enough. I think we had attacks we could have made on the Conservative Party's economic record, for example, on productivity, on exports, failing on the deficit, economic growth not working for everyone else. I think we had a lot of stronger message to make, which we didn't make as well. I think the key reason why people didn't vote for us is I think they wanted to stop the SNP, and I don't think the Labour Party realised to such an extent how much the middle class voters, people in the south, just didn't want an SNP voice in government.
Thank you very much. Matthew, you wanted to talk about something to do with this before I come to Darren's highlight of the night.
Yeah, I think that this is ultimately what tore apart the Labour Party in this election, was all this talk of tactical voting, vote this, get Tory, vote SNP, get Labour, and I think that undermined whatever it was that Labour was supposed to be standing for, because everybody else seemed to be doing it better. The SNP were putting forward a better left-wing agenda. The UKIP were taking on that really strong kind of populist kind of angle, and so Labour were not putting. Well, Labour, they've been in opposition with 5 years of austerity. They should be dragging the Conservatives through the dirt and spitting on their corpse. But yet they seem to take this kind of moderate, kind of Tory light stand instead of actually making a power stance against the Conservative and Lib Dem coalition. And I think that split their vote quite considerably into UKIP, into the SNP in Scotland, and I think that utterly undermines them. And then that combined with Ed Miliband's perceived weakness as a leader, I think it just caused their utter collapse. And then of course, you mentioned the headstones, and that's just a part of.
Let's not mention that.
And that's just a long list in a line of really bizarre, kind of gimmicky little election pledges, and it just didn't work. They weren't making any real points.
8'6" tall election pledges. They weren't that little, were they? They were flipping massive. Not that anyone knows where they are. A comment I forgot to read out earlier on, which did make me chuckle, and this is from that pop punk kid at Fluffy Adam. It says, "Come on, Lily, you didn't just lose Morley, you lost your balls." SD24. Good old Ed, he's gone. And I have to say, for all the people tweeting so far, the moment that Ed Balls went seems to be quite a popular one. Elliot Smith, at Elliot Smith, says Ed Balls losing his seat, of course, is his favourite moment from what's going on in the night. Cameron S, Cameron _ surname, agrees with that one. And and that goes on for quite a few other people. Where is it? Salman Anwar at Salman Anwar 95 says that it was Estimate Vey, it was Anna Soubry when she won. That was his highlight of the night, and he screamed a little. He also then goes on. He then points out it was a good scream in a good way. Can I say, Salman, again, obviously I never expressed an opinion on the show, but can I just say, Salman, I agree with you entirely. I think Anna Soubry winning was a fantastic moment, and she's one of my absolute favourite MPs, and it was great to see her get back in. I also agree with your other point, Salman, which is the low light being that Estimate Vey lost, and it was such a dirty campaign, and you can't wait for her to be back. Other points that people have made. James E. Arrowsmith at Arrow Jams. The highlight of the evening for him was Greg Mulholland holding on to his Leeds North West seat for the Liberal Democrats. Darryl Devine at the Dasro, winner of last week's poll. Well done. My highlight was Salmon's unforgivingly blunt interview with Jeremy Paxman. I must look that up. I seem to have missed that one. Where are we? Going in the other direction now. Best election night ever, says Chris G. Chris G. quadruple zero. Peter Kellner, our polls weren't as bad as 1992. That was one of his favourites, along with Galloway, Balls, Cable, Ward, Farage, saying goodbye to all of those. James Arrowsmith points out that the anti-Galloway sentiment is very strong tonight. Naturally, none of us is really making any point about this. But Chris Latimer agrees. At Chris J. Latimer, Galloway thinking he'd won and then losing by 10,000. Again, I'm going to clean this one up for sensitivity reasons. No, I won't. I'm actually going to read it out. Stupid bastard. If you do wish to send a letter of complaint about that one, please don't direct it to me. Please direct it to at Chris J. Latimer on Twitter. I was merely quoting. Stupid bastard. John Mousley says, don't blame me, I voted UKIP.
Oh, God.
We have no comment on that one, John. But we'll welcome you on again next week or in future weeks to tell us why. For James at Statism Room 101, the SNP overturning Gordon Brown's 20,000 plus majority in Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath was staggering. And it goes on. Yeah, Joseph Hudson Small at Joe Hudson Small. My highlight was Farage's resignation, followed by the other two getting announced live to the Have I Got News for You panel. Yes, either that, he says, or Russell Brand's complete reversal in opinion, which in fact I think he had several of them, didn't he? Don't vote, vote Green, vote Labour. Oh, actually, I don't really like Ed Miliband, so that would be a mistake to vote. So, yes, lots of people having various highlights there. Bradley Booth saying his real highlight was seeing his SNP friend Chris Law win a 17,000 majority in the seat that's been Labour since the 1950s. And John Bergfist at John L. Bergfist, my moment of the night was Dimbleby saying, for God's sake, just before coming into view after a news bulletin. It's always those lovely, unexpected moments that the highlight is. Darren, I haven't come to you yet, have I?
No.
No, Darren, what was your highlight?
So, highlight. I think that
I know highlights from election night are fairly difficult for Liberal Democrats to find. I'm intrigued to see what you're going to say on this one.
Okay, well, I think that in regards to a shock factor, I think the swing to the SNP, the BBC had to actually change the swingometer because it was just off the chart, and I think that was quite a fascinating element of it. But to go back to my party, as soon as the exit polls were released, I thought that this can't be right. And then we had Paddy Ashdown as a beacon of hope, saying that it wasn't going to be the case and we were going to, hold on as we believed we would. And obviously that wasn't the case. So I already had this roller coaster going on throughout the night. And then it was seat after seat after seat after seat. Joe Swinson, as Matt mentioned, was awful, so lovely. And then it got to about 4:30, I think, and we found out Nick Clegg had held. Yay! I think, actually, to be fair, there were a surprising number of Conservatives who cheered at Nick Clegg holding on somehow. Yeah.
There we are.
Mm-hmm. What are you trying to imply there, Gareth?
Simply that, William, I mean, you may well agree with me or not on this, but I think certainly a lot of the Conservatives I know, although they found being in coalition annoying, as I'm sure the Liberal Democrats did as well, they quite admired Nick Clegg for what he'd done and what he'd had to put up with over these years, and they were pleased that he held on rather than someone from Labour winning.
Yeah.
Would that be fair, William?
I say that's very fair. We were actually looking at we were impressed by SNP. We were worried for the cause of the union with Lib Dems going, and also people like Julian Humbert going in Cambridge. We were a bit surprised to see him go, and I mean, there was ones we wished had stayed. So not just from a party reason, but just because we like them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add on this sort of the election night issue? Sorry, go on, Darren. I'll come back to you, William.
Yeah. Well, I think that obviously holding on to Clegg, who is a Eurocrat and did very well, in my opinion, maybe not in the poll that was released straight after, in the debate on the European Union with Farage. And I think that the Conservative Party are going to have a split at some point over Europe. They always do. It seems to be a Tory thing to do. And perhaps we will do quite well out of that.
William.
Yeah, I was considering split. I think the biggest split is actually going to come over fox hunting. I think
I'm going to briefly ban mention of fox hunting, because we don't have time for that tonight. And it didn't rear its head in the election. But I take your point. I will happily cover it another time, maybe.
We already have with
once
news,
I have
so I'll just leave it out.
Yes. Yeah, you wanted to make another point, I think.
My other point was going to say when I forgot who was making it, but they were saying about how Labour weren't doing as well as they thought they would. I think part of that's because it's sort of like the Lib Dems' place in being in almost the centre ground between what used to be Lib Dem used to be between Labour and Conservatives. Now it's almost like Labour's in between the SNP and the Conservatives, and they've got that ground in between, I'm afraid.
Okay, right, Skylar. Obviously, we've had someone on. Has someone got a mouse in their workings? There appears to be a mouse here scraping away at someone's microphone. If there is, please dispose of it humanely, and then later on stamp on it very roughly. Skylar, someone spoke to us before about three party leaders resigning in quick succession. You don't seem convinced.
No. So I want to say two things. One about just Nick Clegg real quick. He has mentioned that he thinks history will judge him kindly, and I actually agree for him, or agree with him. And I think that Nick Clegg, I don't necessarily agree with everything he did in government, but I think he's probably one of the most decent and principled politicians on either side of the Atlantic, and I have a lot of respect for him. So, my heart hurt for Nick Clegg, and I think Nick Clegg will be remembered kindly by history. But I think the thing to remember, Darren, and this is maybe going to hurt a little, is that to really, speaking as a historian here, to really be able to judge the historic record, you need a generation or two. And I think that it's going to take at least a generation for the Lib Dems to recover from this as well.
I'm still young yet this time.
I always think you need 100 years.
No, I haven't got that long, I'm afraid.
Well, I mean, it only took 70 or 80 years last time, didn't it?
Give or take.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very short time. But with regards to Nigel Farage, I mean, he hasn't ruled himself out of a leadership contest. He said he'll make that decision after the summer, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him back. Maybe not leading the party, but certainly with an active role in it. I don't think that he's going anywhere. He has too much of a cult of personality, and they can take a lot of hope out of the fact that they increased their number of the popular vote so much. And him and Natalie Bennett could be a force to be reckoned with if they team up for an alternative voting system and electoral reform.
I'm sorry. Can I just need to clarify something. Did you say that Natalie Bennett would be a force to be reckoned with?
I think that if the Greens and UKIP team up, that is going to be the perfect storm of, I'm not entirely sure what, probably a word that I can't say on this show, but I think that you should watch out for that. And I think that there's going to be talks. A lot of Green Party activists that I've spoke to have expressed a willingness to work with UKIP on this issue.
Well, you heard it here first. There will be some sort of Green UKIP pact. Presumably, they're all uniting around Roger Helmer's environment, and the Greens' adoration of free capitalism. That'll be an interesting one. So thank you for the prediction. If it happens, maybe I'll do a Paddy Ashdown and threaten to eat a hat that I don't have.
Just over electoral reform, nothing else. They'll go their separate ways afterwards.
They did. I mean, they did do that though. I mean, we had a referendum campaign, and they united over that, and the public said no thanks. And when's this going to happen? I mean, do you really think that a Green UKIP alliance is going to convince a majority Conservative government to hold a referendum on changing the electoral system?
No, and I don't think it's likely that it's actually going to come to a referendum, but I do think that they're going to try and make it a sticking point. I think that it's going to become an issue that they speak a lot more about, because it really did hurt them. I mean, it really did. You know, the Greens would have had about 25 MPs if we under proportional representation. So.
Obviously dependent on the system, but yes, the point is,
relevant.
Yes, the point is relevant. Now, I'd like to think at this point in time about what's going to happen next for the parties. So we'll start first of all with the party that probably should have won the election, which is Labour. I mean, where do they go from here? I mean, who do we think might be an effective leader for the Labour Party? Darren, as someone who whose party was generally seen as being more in tune with Labour than the Conservatives, which is what has attracted so much ire from people. Who do you think might actually lead the Labour Party back to success?
I think Chuka might be quite good. Just because I'd actually disagree with what Matt said earlier about the Labour Party perhaps needing to be the party of complete anti-austerity and, you know, go veering off to the left, because I think it shows that the Labour Party only succeeds when it goes for, you know, floating Tory voters perhaps, or it needs to cast its net a bit wider. And I think that someone like that would be the right, although he might be a bit cosmopolitan for some Labour voters, I'm not sure. I think they've got a real task ahead of them, not that I'm one to talk.
Yes, yeah, fair enough. Do you have a favourite, Lily? I mean, do you think there's someone who already stands out to you, or a couple of people who stand out to you as being credible leaders?
Yes, I would definitely say Dan Jarvis. Dan Jarvis as a leader would do an incredible job, in my opinion. I would need to hear more on his actual personal views, because I disagreed with Ed Miliband, for example, on drugs. So I would want to see, you know, a more liberal leader, a more, because I think the problem with Chuck Amuna is he wants to focus more on the centre ground, and I think that's completely the wrong approach to go about it. There's no point in going to the centre ground if you're going to lose your core vote, okay? Because listen here, Gareth. Let me use the example of Stoke-on-Trent, okay?
Yeah.
Stoke-on-Trent is traditionally a safe Labour seat, okay? UKIP are now 15% behind Labour in Stoke-on-Trent North and Stoke-on-Trent Central, okay? UKIP are going to be gunning for the working class vote in the North, okay? If we go to the centre ground and go for the middle class votes, which I agree, you know, more middle class votes is great, and go for the squeeze middle, but we need to keep our core vote. We need to extend our core vote. We need to be the party of the working class again. And if we go for a Chuck and Runner, that simply isn't going to happen. So my vote for leader will be Dan Jarvis. I think Dan Jarvis will be an incredible leader. I would want to hear more from him. But Chuck and Runner would be an absolute joke of leader, in my opinion.
Okay, Matthew, you seem to agree with that.
Yeah, I definitely agree that taking the centre ground is the wrong thing to do, because I think several other parties will have a stronger claim to that. But so what it needs to do is keep left wing. I think Ed Miliband broadly got that idea right. It needs to be more aspirational, more positive. What Ed Miliband was doing, it was more attacking Tory bankers, attacking these millionaires with their mansion taxes and their taxing water bottles. I know that was mine in class. But at the risk of sounding like a Blairite, I think that kind of negative message is not going to appeal to many voters. Whereas the idea of uplifting people, the idea of education, I think that's something that especially seeing as we're going to get another 5 years of austerity, I think that's an approach that would play massively into Labour's favour.
Okay, a few points that people have made online here. We've got Joe Pattinson at Joe_Pattinson. I'm in Sheffield. Oh no, it's wrong one. Nigel Farage to replace Nigel Farage. It's UKIP parody and motion overload. Alex Noonan says, I'm in Sheffield Hallam and many Tories voted for Clegg to keep Labour out. Other people saying that, Nathaniel Higgins here says there'll be a Green, Lib Dem, SNP and UKIP pact for STV as an electoral system. And here we are. Diane Abbott is what Labour needs. Socialism and patriotism, says James at Status in Room 101. Hashtag trolling. Apparently, Chris G, bad news here for you though, Lily. Chris G says Dan Jarvis just announced he is not running for Labour leader. Breaking news here on Spectrum Debate: Dan Jarvis is not going to be standing for the leadership of the Labour Party.
Well, let's wait and see, Chris. Let's wait and see.
Okay. Let's see if it has a thing for that. Certainly, just 1 second. Salman Anwar says if Labour don't go to the centre ground, where else have they got to go? And Leon French is also reporting that Dan Jarvis has announced he's not standing for leader. And Cameron S says Lilly disagreed with Miliband on drugs. I don't know what he sorry, I can't speak tonight. I didn't know he was on drugs, but it would explain lots, he says, and he's tweeted quite an amusing photograph there, which I'm just going to retweet. Can I just clarify? The suggestion is not that Ed Miliband was on drugs in the slightest, more that the photo was a little bit amusing. Okay, so I really should get some solicitors involved here just to protect myself. So 3 seconds after Lily endorsed Dan Jarvis, the Press Association reports that he won't run. Lily. Lily, you seem to have a lot of power. Can you please declare? Can you please declare that I will not win the national lottery within the next month?
You will, Gary. You're going to win it.
Great. Thanks for helping me and my joy of riches out there. Oh, well, that's Gareth condemned to poverty for life. Okay, William.
I would say if Jarvis just ruled himself out, Kendall needs to run, and Joe Kendall. I think she's got the best chance. Chucker and Tristram Hunt both would just destroy, and Danny Burnham, all of which wouldn't do Labour Party any good.
As a Conservative, though, which would you prefer?
As a Conservative, I would personally love to. I personally love Chucker to run. Actually, I think Chucker would destroy Labour in key Labour areas like Newcastle. I think UKIP would end up getting huge gains. And areas like Newcastle and Teesside, Chucker turned up apparently to a Teesside event and basically said how awful Teesside was, and not in a nice way.
Okay, that was helpful. Well done, Chucker. There, Skylar.
Well, I was just sitting here thinking about Dan Jarvis and how smart it is, I think, for him not to stand for the Labour leadership right now. He needs some front bench experience before he leads the party, and Dan. So it's interesting because Dan is somebody who I've followed for a while. I have a soft spot in my heart for Barnsley for reasons that we can discuss another time. He's excellent. I know, I get that a lot, but I love Barnsley as Brill. Dan's a really great constituency MP. He has a really great record there, and I think that no matter what the front bench looks like, he needs to be a part of it. But I am kind of relieved he's not standing for the leadership because I don't know that it was ready. As far as who it could be, I have no idea. I honestly am just sort of underwhelmed by the options. I would agree with Lily. It does not need to be Chuka. I think Chuka Umunna is not what Labour needs right now.
Thank you. A few of the other points people have made here online so far. Again, they're all pointing out that Dan has decided to pull out. Bradley Booth says Labour have a choice: abandon Scotland and win back England by moving right, or move left and lose England. Joe Hudson Small: Labour might never get a majority again under STV, but they'll support it because it'll probably keep the Conservatives out. Joe Pattinson: Chukaramuna, can he eat a bacon sandwich? We cover all the key points here on Spectrum. Lily for Labour leader says, Pyro the Fireboy. We're back, Pyro. So there you are. That's your first endorsement, Lily. And I don't think it'll be the last one, because there have been some very pleasant comments about you tonight. So I didn't wish to read them out because I'll direct them to you later. Tom Chaplow at Tom Nishambles. Oh, Tom Nishambles, that's quite clever. It's not about left-right positioning. Labour need to connect with voters. That's our problem. Political positioning comes after. Salman Anwar says that Kendall did quite well this morning. I'm assuming that she was on TV and he watched, not that somehow he met her this morning. Nathaniel Higgins: you're a Conservative. Labour should do the opposite of what you say. Salman Anwar: as a Tory, I'd love Burnham to become leader. Bradley Booth: Barnsley is Brill, quote of the night. So you've won the quote of the night contest there, Skylar. Tell me, anyone else want to tell us anything about what they think Labour will do now and who might lead them?
Liz Kendall will be a disastrous Labour leader too, that's all I would say.
Is there any particular reason why you think that?
I just think going to New Labour and just focusing on aspiration would be completely the wrong approach, Gareth. Because as I say, Gareth, there's no point going to the centre if you're just going to lose your core vote. We need to win back Scotland. If we have Chukaramuna or Liz Kendall leader, we're never going to regain Scotland back.
Okay, well, that covers that one. Now let's think about the Liberal Democrats for a moment. Obviously, we won't spend too much time on them because there's not a lot to talk about. But with only 8 MPs left, the Liberal Democrats have a bit of a bind because one of them has ruled himself out of being leader, and that leaves apparently 2 other front runners, being Norman Lamb and Tim Farron. And I'm not sure anyone can name any of the others. So what is going to happen with the Liberal Democrats now? I mean, Darren, do you really stand unearthly? Who's going to be leader? I mean, who would you back?
Well, I personally probably stand on the right of the party. So my first choice wouldn't be Tim Farron. But that said, I think thinking pragmatically, he would be quite good because he would be enough of a change to resonate with many of the electorate. And I think that he comes from a single parent background, not particularly wealthy, public school, all of the above, and I think that he could potentially be quite a positive change as long as he doesn't unleash this social liberal forum type policy which just veers us off to the left. I do not think that's right. I think that we need to stay in the centre ground because that is where we are known for being, and I think that we really can, like I said before, over the European question, we can do really well out of it and rebuild.
But some people in your party would say that actually the Liberals are viewed as being far too right-wing. They're viewed as being on the centre-right by many. And actually what you need is a healthy dose of left-wing, because that seems to be where all the growth is, with the Greens, with the SNP. So surely it is that leftward tack that the Liberals need to take.
And that would be something that we would be given by electing a leader such as Tim Farron.
Okay, all right. Is there anyone else who would be capable of leading the party other than, say, Tim Farron, Norman Lamb? Is there anyone else?
Well, Nick Clegg. I think that...
Well, if Nigel Farage has resigned and might come back, why can't Nick Clegg?
Yeah, quite right, and I would love him to do so, but I don't think that's going to happen, let's be honest. But I think it's actually written in the party constitution that you can't run for leader if you're not an MP, unfortunately, so we're a bit screwed there.
So that rules you out, then?
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Well, this is a shame. William, you have a name for someone you think might be suitable.
Mark Williams, the MP for Ceredigion. I think he's quite good as a as a Lib Dem voice, I think he's quite a good Lib Dem voice of what they've got left. He's been solid. He's well liked in Ceredigion. I've heard him speak because being going to Aberystwyth University, heart of his constituency. I think he's a person to watch anyway.
Sorry, can I just confirm, is this a Liberal Democrat who's held on to a seat in a big university town?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got 2 universities in it. 2 universities, Lampeter and Aberystwyth.
Quite big ones.
We had that joke last week.
They're not very big, but they're very big in concern. He's not a huge population in that area, so it's the type of one you actually thought the Conservatives could have gained more than they did.
Now, Matt, you're in the region roughly where Nick Clegg is and managed to hold on to his seat, and of course you're in the city where the Lib Dems did hold on to a seat in Leeds.
Yeah.
What can the Lib Dems do now, do you think?
I think what they need to do is, well, first of all, even if it was an option to get Nick Clegg re-elected as leader, I don't think that would be the right thing to do. He is a poison chalice. The perception of him as a liar, I think, is too strong for them to really continue with him. And I think they need to re-solidify as Liberals rather than taking this kind of sort of wishy-washy, we're not Labour and we're not Tories kind of position, because I don't think that's really appealing to anyone, because it's that sort of centre ground. It's not going to appeal to the people who want to go more left towards Labour. It's not going to appeal to. It only really works in the context of a coalition, and even then, it's only in theory, because it clearly didn't work in this election. But so, especially in the next 5 years, I mean, the Tories are already announcing plans to reintroduce the Snoopers Charter. So I think the need for a Liberal voice in the next 5 years will become much, much greater. And I think if the Lib Dems can seize authority over that Liberal ground, I think they might even gain some ground in the next 5 years and manage to reassert themselves, maybe if not the third party, at least not in the dead position they're in now.
Okay, a few of the comments people have made so far. Obviously, these have now been answered in one sense, but Chris G says, Chris Huhne is out of prison. How about him for Lib Dem leader? Leon French himself is offering to lead the Lib Dems. He says he'll have a bit of spare time in a couple of weeks. James Arrowsmith, he'd like to move the Lib Dems slightly left. Joe Hudson Small says, well, Scotland's been lost and Labour should accept that. Chris G, the next leader will be anti-Clegg, so it's going to be Tim Farron, and that's bad news for Labour because Farron won't be winning over Tories. James Arrowsmith agrees that Tim Farron would make a good leader for him. Craig_Green Day, which is Fallow Flynn Hillbilly. That looks more complicated than I thought it was going to be when I started reading it. Got to be Tim Farron for me. Anyone thinking differently? Bradley Booth, actually liking Tory people. Oh dear, my Scottish political career is over before it even began, he says. Salman Anwar, I reckon a lot of SNP seats will go back to Labour next election because of the Tory government. Really, it was vote SNP, get Tory. Nathaniel Higgins, anyone who managed to hang on to their seat after the recent decimation of the Liberal Democrats could lead. Greg Mulholland, he likes a pint. Follow the Farage route, suggests Joe Pattinson. Tim Farron does appear to be quite a popular choice here amongst our tweeters. Anyone else? Lily?
Yeah, first of all, I agree completely with Matt and Darren that we really do need a Liberal voice in the next Parliament. I desperately hope that it's actually going to be the Labour Party. There can be a new socially Liberal Party that can take on the Tories. But the Liberal Democrats can do it exactly the same. I think the Liberal Democrats can rejuvenate in opposing the Conservative Party because they're going to do some very, very nasty stuff. They're going to have £12 billion working cuts. They're going to reintroduce the Snoopers Charter. They're going to have the EU referendum. You know, what a chance for Liberal Democrats, the most pro-European party, make the claim for Europe, make the claim for liberalism. I think Nick Farron will be the best leader for the Liberal Democrats. I'm not really a big fan of Norman Lamb, who's realistically the only other possible candidate. I think the Liberal Democrats need to become a truly liberal party again. They could go down the road of libertarianism if they want, because that's really a political ideology that isn't really represented in the United Kingdom. The Liberal Democrats need to be a liberal party again. Their campaign of don't look left, don't look right, vote Liberal Democrat was completely pathetic. realistically, is that going to convince anyone of voting Liberal Democrat? Not many, as the result has shown. So the Liberal Democrats need to be the Liberal Democrats again, imposing this Conservative government, bringing a pro-European party in opposition, which I know they can do it again.
Thank you. Next, let's move on to a couple of other parties because they've made a big impact this election. The Greens and UKIP have already been mentioned. They have received several million votes, but between them only managed to grab 2 MPs, and UKIP managed to take 1 council, but then the Greens lost one of theirs. What is going to happen to UKIP and the Greens in future? I don't know if anyone wants to. Skylar, I'll come to you first on this one. What is it you think might happen with UKIP and the Greens in future? I know you talked about campaigns for PR, but in terms of how they're going to develop, who might lead them, what the future holds, what do you think?
Well, that's going to be really interesting, and I think anybody saying that they have the answer to that is is maybe not being completely truthful. It's hard to say, you know, and I say that because if you'd asked me a week ago, I would have said we were entering a new era in British politics where coalitions were going to become more important and the Greens and UKIP might actually make a difference. We have a clear majority government now. I mean, I have no idea. I'm still sort of reeling. One thing I will say the Greens have to do is ditch Natalie Bennett. I think that absolutely has to happen. She performed abysmally throughout the campaign. She had some highlights. She had some good moments, but that LBC interview was really not a great kickoff, and she never really improved from there. And you've got a wonderful spokesperson in Caroline Lucas, and I don't understand why she's not leading this party right now. And as for UKIP, I think they're either going to stick with Farage, or if not, they're going to have a lot of soul searching to do, because that party is Nigel Farage, and I don't know who is going to step into that role and who can really take the reins and lead that party with as much charisma as Farage has.
Thank you very much. A few comments already on this one. We've had, I tweeted, what does the future hold for UKIP and the Greens? Leon French says, none at all. That was my impression of Leon's laugh. It was probably not at all like that. In fact, I know it's not at all like that. I apologise, Leon. John Mousley, he says, for UKIP, Stephen Wolfe as leader, win Welsh Assembly seats, proving ourselves in local government, and then attack Labour in 2020. That would be his 5-year plan. Cameron S at Cameron_surname has tweeted a few pictures which we've retweeted, which explain about the impact of the elections and how, you know, seats and so on didn't reflect numbers of votes. Again, Fallow Flynn Hillbilly at Craig_Greenday. That's probably the biggest mouthful I've had to take all night. Moving swiftly on. UKIP to fade after the EU referendum promised by the Tories. The Greens to continue growing their share of the vote. Bradley Booth, I think the Lib Dems should be included in this topic. As in, what is the future of them? Comments. What do we think, the rest of us, about UKIP and the Greens? Will, because UKIP have been a big worry to the Conservatives, haven't they? And in fact, UKIP have successfully pushed the Conservatives.
Yeah, they have.
The right in many areas. So, what's going to happen with them now? Because, you know, they've had a big impact, and they're going to continue to, aren't they?
They are. I think it really depends how the EU referendum goes. If the EU referendum goes to is leaving the EU, I reckon we could almost see a Conservative Party which is where a section of it is leaning far closer to UKIP, which would have to reinvent itself afterwards anyway, compared to a much more centre ground section of the party, and the right-wing section of the party would be almost in complete agreement with UKIP, which would be very interesting.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come to you in a sec, Matt. I just want a couple of contradictory tweets here, which is the joy of this. Chris G says, the Greens are not a proper political party. They exist to split the left and offer communism for the 21st century.
Full communism now.
Full communism now. I'm waiting for the Red Scare bot to tweet us now. That is bound to happen any moment. Nathaniel Higgins says, I think they'll implement STV, make Labour more left-wing, the Conservatives more right-wing, and then disappear. James James Arrowsmith, I agree with Skylar about Natalie Bennett. Why isn't Caroline Lucas leader? If I remember correctly, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, if you dare, the reason they did that was because Caroline Lucas wanted to focus on her constituency and make sure she won that and allow someone else to sort of the free rein to, run the national campaign. But I could be wrong, so someone please let me know on that one. Leon French, 5 out of 10, host Gareth, nearly there. Is Leon doubting me on something? We'll have to have words, Leon, you and I. Oh, that was the laughter. Sorry. That pop punk kid at Fluffy Adam. Careful, Skylar, you'll have Nathaniel Higgins up in arms criticising Natalie Bennett. Bradley Booth has linked us to Angry Salmond. Do you have no sense of identity, enjoying arguing aggressively with your colleagues and remaining out of touch with society? Join Labour today. Thank you, Angry Salmond. Cameron S. Oh dear, Gareth, oh dear. Most unwise, to quote Galloway. And Bradley Booth, only joking. Lib Dems, just enjoying being the third largest party in the whole of the UK, he says, from the SNP point of view. Matt.
Well, I think that was a very interesting point that William brought up about the right of the Conservative Party becoming increasingly UKIP, because especially with the EU referendum coming up, like for certain now, we've got to ask the question: what is the point of UKIP? If regardless of the result, if we leave the EU, what are the point of UKIP? If we stay in the EU, the people have decided what is the point of UKIP. But we can't really ignore the fact that, as it stands, that they've got, what is it, like 12% of the vote? They were the third most voted for party, I think. And that support isn't just going to go away. So I think what they're going to have to do is, if they do lose Farage, which is obviously going to be a big deal for them because his kind of populist working class rhetoric is probably where most of their kind of voting base has emerged from. If they lose, they're going to have to find another sort of issue to latch onto. And I think, given the fact that they have got one MP on sort of 3.8 million votes, I think that issue is probably going to be proportional representation, and whether they'll be able to swing possibly Labour into that camp as well, given that they did promise some kind of electoral reform in their 1997 manifesto and then didn't. I think that might be the way to go, is that sort of push to a new issue and do what they've done with immigration in the run-up to this election, and sort of polarise opinions and sort of force both of the major parties into uncharted waters. So I'm hoping that'll be really exciting.
Well, you've made it sound exciting. So that's good. You should go into PR. That was very good. Darren.
Well, I think
UKIP and the Greens.
Yeah, UKIP, the Greens don't really have a voice in the northeast apart from somewhere like South Shields, I think, where they have some lady with grey hair doing quite well. But anyway, at UKIP, I think that, well, my parents, for example, they voted UKIP, and I think that amongst, like Matt said, amongst the working class, especially in the northeast, I think they really could get the foot on the old ladder there, because I think they came second in my constituency, actually. So I really think that rhetoric of populist rhetoric on being anti-immigration, and I think especially after the expenses scandal and everything like that, not trusting politicians and hearing that someone is anti-establishment, that really resonates with the working class voter in the northeast. It's just, that's the impression I get from people I talk to up here who do vote UKIP. I mean, yeah, I really do think that they could do quite well in the northeast if they keep the momentum going.
Thank you very much. In fact, I think UKIP hold one of the 3 MEP seats in the northeast, don't they? I think it's 2 Labour and 1 UKIP. When it used to be, before that, I think it was it 1 Labour, 1 Lib Dem, and 1 Conservative?
A mix, yeah.
Yeah. So it's quite a big change around there. Okay. One final full question to each of you, because we focused primarily on a lot of the opposition parties. But let's think about the Conservatives now. David Cameron announced before the election that this would be his last election, that he wouldn't stand again for a third term if he was re-elected. So, who do you think might take over from him, and how are they going to get there? I'm going to come to you first, William. It's only fair.
Yeah, thanks. This is really tough. I think one of the most likely candidates is Theresa May. It's not who I personally want, but I think it's one of the most likely candidates. I personally like Rory Stewart, the head of the Defence Select Committee, to be in charge because he's great. But I think Boris is going to have quite a large role in it, but I don't think he's a sensible enough choice. And I think some very scary things could go down if Gove ends up as in charge, because it'll polarise so much opinion towards him. So.
Okay, thank you. Lily, you seem to be agreeing with that point.
Yeah, Gove would be a disaster. Please don't. Oh yeah, please pick Michael Gove leader. He'll do great. Roy Stewart.
Suddenly I'm doubting your sincerity on that.
No. Roy Stewart would be an interesting leader. I personally think Boris Johnson will be the leader. He's vacuous. He's got no real ideology. He would lie. He'll be great for the Conservatives, Gareth. I think he would probably be leader. He's the type of person who should. He's very Machiavellian. He could outmaneuver all of them. I don't think Theresa May. I don't think she'll be popular enough amongst MPs and the like. And anyone else? Javid, he's a bit unknown. So I think realistically Boris Johnson will be leader. That's my opinion.
Okay, in a similar vein, can I recommend to you, Lily, that Labour elects Andy Burnham, because there are no strange or dodgy backstories from his time as a Secretary of State for the Health Service.
You're so sincere, Gareth. I have to vote Andy Burnham now.
So please do vote for Andy Burnham if you're in the Labour Party, because the Conservatives are very afraid of Andy Burnham.
I know you are, Gareth.
Darren, who might take over in the Conservatives?
I have no idea who it might be, but I do think that every candidate possibility that it could be would take the party even further to the right. I think that Cameron's compassionate conservatism would be ditched at the first hurdle. So I think whoever it is, the Conservatives won't do as well as they have. They certainly won't be increasing the number of votes in 2020, whoever it is. I don't think they will.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come to Skylar and Matt in a moment to close this particular topic. Just a few comments that people have made at home. First of all, Pyro, where are we? Pyro the Fireboy says, when are we getting married then, Gareth? I'm not sure what that's in relation to. But I prefer water to fire. In fact, this is what this is filled with every week. So if you come with me as a fire boy, there's a very good chance you're going to be doused. So I'm not sure that's going to work. I'm sorry. We have Salman Anwar chanting Theresa May, Theresa May, Theresa May, followed by Pyro the Fireboy saying, please no, not Theresa May. John Mousley, Gove swoons by killing all his opponents on the field of honour. That would be interesting. James Harris, I don't see any great leaders in the Tories at the moment. James, stated in Room 101, would love to see Michael Gove as the next Conservative leader. Leon French he says that William Brown may be happy to know David Davis agrees with your idea on Rory Stewart leading the party. Where are we? Oh yes, that pop punk kid, Fluffy Adam. Boris, he says, very much in favour of them. Oh yes, and Chris G, our bigoted evil Tory party might have to invite a young female gay Scot down to take the reins. I'm assuming he's talking about the fabulous Ruth Davidson.
Ruth Davidson is amazing.
James Arrowsmith, electing Boris for Tory leader would be like Labour electing Diane Abbott as leader, a terrible decision. Can I also say to my friends in the Labour Party, I think Diane Abbott will be an excellent choice for leader, and perhaps a dual team of her and Andy Burnham would be the thing to do. Okay, no, you remember that. And oh yes, Cameron Singh says yes, Boris or Sajid Javid, bearing in mind he'll have a couple of years to let people get to know him.
Yeah.
Can French and Hudson be the Mayweather and Pacquiao? I don't know why I bother trying to say that. I was never going to say it. Portuguese was something I could never manage. Leon French is now also offering himself to become the new leader of the Conservative Party.
Leon.
So thank you. You're very generous in your offers to lead pretty much anyone that has a vacancy, Leon. But thank you very much indeed. Skylar, tell me, who do you think might take over after Cameron?
Well, I think there are two questions. One is obviously who, which I'll get to in a second, but another is when, because he hasn't said when he will step down, just ahead of the next election. And so I think that that'll be interesting to see how long David Cameron decides to remain in number 10 before turning over the reins to whoever it is that succeeds him. A few names I jotted down have already been mentioned. Boris Johnson, I think, is probably the most likely. Theresa May, though, I really hope not. But never underestimate Theresa May. I mean, she is... after a nuclear holocaust, there will be cockroaches in Theresa May, the woman who's staying in power. She's proven.
Can I just interrupt you for one moment, Skylar? Because we all know, I mean, all of us, I mean, myself included, we bandy around these sort of blandishments that are based on some form of stereotype. But in her 5 years as Home Secretary, which is a fairly unprecedented length of time, Theresa May has managed to change the law to remove terrorists from the country who were wanted on trial for serious crimes elsewhere. She has led international calls and the battle against international slavery and human trafficking. Hang on. By all means, you can By all means, you can come in a second, Lily, but let me reel off the good things before you have a go on the bad ones. These are her actual records so far. So she's led the international fight against human trafficking, which is a terrible thing. She has made sure that people who are seeking asylum get an answer within a few months rather than waiting years, as they have done for 20 or 30 years on the trot. She's made a big, substantial difference to people. And so it's not quite true, is it, this idea that she's some sort of devil incarnate?
Well, and I didn't say that. I just meant by my comment.
I think the whole cockroach thing is slightly.
Well, I mean, I'm not comparing her to a cockroach, other than the fact that she can survive literally anything. The Home Office is not exactly known for being kind to whoever heads it. Theresa May, I have a real issue with her, in particular with asylum seekers, LGBT asylum seekers in particular. I think her record there is atrocious. But, I mean, I'll let Lily chime in with more, because she seems to have a lot to say about that and probably knows a lot more of Theresa May's record than I do. A couple other names, I would say Ruth Davidson would be a brilliant one, and then also somebody who has no shot, but who I would really like, is Sarah Wollaston. She's a Conservative MP I can get on board with.
Thank you. Okay, Lily, you wanted to come on in.
Well, I was going to say, Gareth, if she's cut the number of police officers, she wants to introduce the People's Charter, and she's going to abolish the Human Rights Act. So she's not really a great Home Secretary, though, is she, Gareth? She's not that great.
Well, I mean, that's all a matter of opinion. I mean, in terms of whether or not you think that's great, you just happen to disagree with the policies. That doesn't mean she's necessarily objectively bad, surely.
Well, you've also got the record number of self-harming in prisons, Gareth. There's many more. I'm just using 3 examples which are blatantly obvious. Wanting to abolish the Human Rights Act isn't really a nice thing to want to do, is it? Wanting to introduce a new People's Charter, not really a nice thing to want to do. So you seem to be praising her, on most things, Gareth, but you need to remember she isn't. She wants to do other things as well. Isn't very nice either.
To be fair, I was simply trying to offer some balance, to say here are some really good things that someone has done. So it's always worth noting that. You might disagree with some, but I don't think.
I'm doing the same. I'm doing the same.
May I?
Fair enough. Okay, Matt, who might take over?
Well, I agree. First of all, I agree completely on Lily on Theresa May. I think she would be an absolute disaster in the realm of civil liberties. But I also disagree that Boris Johnson would be a very good leader. Because, yes, you are right, he is quite vacuous, quite flibbity-jibbity. I'm sure we've all seen Ballot Monkeys. I think Hugh Dennis's attack on him there is absolutely spot on. But I think in the position of leader, he'll be subject to much deeper and much more biting media scrutiny. And I think his kind of vacuousness, his emptiness, under that kind of light, I think it will begin to falter and his support will gradually disappear. So, as for my own suggestions, I would quite like to see Anna Soubry. I think Anna Soubry is a magnificent lady, even though I disagree with her slightly on her position on the Snoopers Charter. Possibly even George Osborne, actually. And I don't think it will happen. I think he's perhaps a bit too unpopular at this point, but I don't think he would be a terrible leader.
Thank you. Now, we've had George Osborne has also been recommended by James at Statism Room 101. Marshall at Marshall_MCF suggests Joanna Lumley. Personally, I think she would be quite good as Patsy, playing the role of Conservative leader. I think that will be worth watching. Bradley Booth asks, serious question, is Boris even real? Is it an English prank on Scotland that people even like him? Cameron S proves that nobody will ever take over after Cameron. I will go on forever. And there's a rather fetching photo of him with David Cameron outside number 10. I recognise it from somewhere, but I just can't remember where. Sajid Javid says Max Rogers at Max Ethan Rogers. Chris G, Theresa May, speech of the year to the Police Federation, however she's not a leader. Salman Anwar says Theresa May stopped artificial race-related stop and search, the modern-day slavery act, new domestic abuse laws, and revenge porn laws. And he carries on, it's Theresa May, Theresa May, Theresa May, why is no one chanting?
Was that Liberal Democrats in government, the revenge porn thing, actually? That was pushed through by Liberal Democrats. The Tories have a real thing for taking away our achievements in government.
Just like the
and also your seats.
Yes.
So, you know, at a start as you finish, take your good ideas, take your seats, and there we go. William.
Yeah, obviously our one sausage MP would be great because, yeah, of course But I think the SNP are going to be trying to hunt her down next election. I honestly do. They're going to be trying to consolidate what they've got, and they'll be aiming for every single seat that isn't theirs already. So I don't think that's a strong enough case to have her. So there are other names. I don't think George really or Theresa, because both of them, it's quite hard, I think, to go from either Chancellor or Home Secretary to go to Prime Minister, simply because you've got quite a lot of resentment that goes with those jobs. Sajid Javid is a good candidate, but I think I don't know why. I haven't got excited about him yet. I probably will do soon, but I haven't got excited about him yet. But yeah, I stick by Rory Stewart would be a good choice. I also would like to say about Sarah Wollaston. She's a Tory in name only in some cases. Yes, she is. She's very much very centre ground. I don't think she'll actually work as a PM, and that's what the Tories will be looking for. They won't be looking for a leader.
Thank you very much. Some final comments from you at home here. Marshall quite likes the idea of it not just being Joanna Lumley, as he said, but as Patsy, because Patsy would get rid of all tax on booze and fags. So there are advantages to this kind of thing. David Jeffrey points out at David Jeffrey _ hi, David. If you want PR, it's because you backed a loser and nobody likes your party. Get more votes, simple as. David Jeffrey bringing on the sass on Twitter. Bradley Booth, Katie Hopkins for leader of the Tories.
No.
Sharp intake of breath there, I think, from all Tories. Salman Anwar, I hoped Soubry would get Defence Minister in this cabinet, but you never know, maybe she'll get something else. And anything else in here? Far too much, in fact, yes. Yeah, far too much. So I'm going to end the show on that rather incompetent note of me not being able to find something to say that I wanted to say on Twitter. Thank you all very much indeed at home for taking, or wherever you are, for taking part in tonight's show. If you would like to appear next week, do get in touch nice and quickly, and you can come on the show. It remains for me to thank our wonderful guests from tonight. Thank you very much indeed, Darren for appearing tonight. Thank you very much, Lily, for appearing tonight. It's always a pleasure to have you on again. Matt, thank you for you and for Darren's first appearances. I hope you've both enjoyed it. Skylar, thank you for your appearance and for popping over from America just to appear on Spectrum Debates. We know that's the only reason you came over, really. And William, it's nice to see you back, and again, congratulations on your victory on Thursday. And that's it. That's the end of tonight's show. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday night, and we'll see you again next week. Good night.